Join me now from Washington is Professor William Lawrence. He's at the American University. Professor, it was good seeing you. So we saw lots of blistering rebukes of Russia, as we normally do. But despite that, the Kremlin agreed to the exchange of 200 prisoners. How do you see the move? Positive, yes.
Yes, and the intervention, we heard a little bit of the Saudis in the deal is quite important, although it's unclear to me exactly what role they play, but certainly that's the buzz here in Washington among some of the people that I talked to. It's important that everyone condemn Russia for what they did wrong, and that we negotiate with Russia for what everybody needs. You know, whether it's food, whether it's fertilizer, whether it's prisoners back, whether it's a ceasefire, whether it's beginning to go back to respecting international borders. You know, all of that needs to be negotiated from Russia, not brought from Russia at the point of a gun. So it's unfortunate that such terrible rhetoric needs to be used, but I think it goes in tandem with negotiations in some respect. In that, the more Russia is isolated without attacking Russia, militarily, the more likely I think you'll get some of these types of concessions, because then Russia becomes more worried about its reputation. But it's a dance here. Diplomacy is a dance. There are no hard and fast rules, and you have to sort of escalate the rhetoric without escalating the war. And your ultimate goal is to de-escalate the war and get a ceasefire and get back to some kind of new border, which is probably what it's going to look like until Putin is gone. I remain convinced that the crime against Ukraine won't be fully fixed until Putin's out of power, and I don't think that's anytime soon.
So we heard quite a bit from President Zelenskyy this evening. He says a crime has been committed against Ukraine and we demand just punishment and of course, for the murder of thousands of people. But do you think this is a slippery slope that Ukraine is on, considering Russia's recent mention of nuclear retaliation?
Everything Zelensky said was justified. As Biden pointed out, Putin is using nuclear blackmail, which is a violation of the letter and spirit of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They're violating so many international laws, it's hard to count them. I think it's very important, too, that Biden didn't say it was genocide, but he used the language of genocide. And I used to think the attack on Ukraine wasn't genocide until I looked at the UN definition, and it is. It fits the exact definition of genocide. What Putin is doing, what Putin is saying, says there is no Ukrainian people, and Ukraine as a state doesn't have a right to exist. And that Biden pointed out explicitly in the speech. Again, is Zelensky going down a slippery slope? Well, what slope? He's trying to defend his country. If he starts attacking Russia, that's a whole nother thing. If he's doing things to make the war worse, attacking Russian civilians, hitting Russian, infrastructure the way they're hitting Ukrainian infrastructure as they withdraw from these villages that the Ukrainians are taking back, then he could be crossing a line. But right now, Zelensky is justified in saying what he's saying. Now, if I could add one more quick point, he did say that the UN should be disbanded if they can't handle the Ukraine crisis. I don't agree with that. The UN has never been good at solving all the world's problems, and when they do solve problems, it's slowly and with the participation of member states like Turkey, who stepped up here and is playing one of the main roles in the diplomacy. But we need the UN, even though it's imperfect, and we need Ukraine to be defended. And I think all of the language was justified.
Speaking of the UN, Zelensky is suggesting that Russia lose its UN veto power. He said, so long as the aggressor is party to decision-making in the international organization, you must be insulated from them, at least until aggression stops. Do you agree?
Philosophically, morally, ethically speaking, Russia as a P5 member should not be allowed to veto its own invasion of another UN member state. Now, cautionary tale here. I don't believe the U.S. Should be condemning Russia without frequently acknowledging that its own invasion of Iraq was also probably a violation. The difference is that the U.S. wasn't trying to exterminate the Iraqi people. They didn't take over the country permanently. They left it to the Shia majority, which is causing other problems. So certainly the U.S. didn't violate the UN Charter and international law as egregiously and as massively as Russia did. But the U.S. has done it as all. And I don't think the U.S. would have liked, losing its seat on the UN Security Council over Iraq, which it could have. I think in the end here, we have to reaffirm the international principles that all need to be followed by every member, every Security Council member, every P5 member, including Russia and the United States, to not invade countries without international approval. Don't forget Libya, for example, which a lot of people whine about, right? That was a UN approved operation. So, and all the Libyans were for it. Every Libyan I've pretty much ever met, was in favor, even the ones on the east who were against the current government. So, these international principles matter. They don't always get applied evenly, but certainly Russia needs to be forced into a position to respect them. And if Russia keeps doing this, what if they invade Hungary, invade 3 more countries? Yeah, there'd be a point at which Russia should lose its seat on the Security Council because it's not keeping the international system working, right? The international legal infrastructure that was set up after World War II and has kept so many larger conflicts from happening.
Professor, always appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
Pleasure.